How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be taking a look at Tales from the Darkside, Season 1. This aired from October 29th, 1983, all the way to August 4th, 1985. And it is made up of 24 episodes. The show was created by horror legend George A. Romero, and it's an anthology horror TV show, which means a new and different story every single time. Lots of really cool stuff and lots of classic anthology horror moments. We, of course, get twist endings, comedic justice, and a whole bunch of crazy different ideas. And one thing that's worth noting is a lot of people think of Darkside as Creepshow the TV show before Creepshow the TV show was an actual thing, and that's because we have involvement from the three big Creepshow people: George A. Romero, Tom Savini, and Stephen King. They all helped out on this show. Obviously, George A. Romero created the show. He also wrote the very first episode, Trick or Treat. Stephen King's short story, Word Processor of the Gods, is adapted in Season 1, and Tom Savini actually directed an episode, Inside the Closet. I think this is actually the first thing he ever directed. Now, in addition to those three, there's actually several other people that wrote short stories that got adapted into Darkside. Robert Bloch, who you guys probably know for the novel Psycho, which Alfred Hitchcock turned into a very famous movie. One of his short stories, A Case of the Stubborns, is adapted here. Harlan Ellison, who you may know for A Boy and His Dog, he did the short story Gin No Chaser, which is also adapted in here. And actually, a whole bunch of these episodes are based on short stories. If anyone out there from the Darkside team, it just happens to be watching this video, I would really, really love if you made a book of, an anthology book of all the Darkside source material. I would love to read that, because right now they're all scattered in different collections. But I would love to be able to sit down and read all these short stories that inspired the episodes. There's a whole bunch of them, and they all seem really fun. But anyway, the types of stories is another thing worth noting. And I really do like the types of stories Darkside chooses. A lot of them, even though they have a horror magical element behind them, are grounded in real human emotions, and they all have something that we can relate to. I like to think of Darkside as like Twilight Zone, but written by a guy that's been through a whole lot in his life and has kind of been beaten down by life. I mean, let's take a look at a few of these episodes. Slippage. In the episode Slippage, a really good episode, this guy is worried that the whole world is forgetting about him and that he'll just slip away and be forgotten about. That is so disturbing, but something we can all relate to. There's an episode, Painkiller, where this guy, a really nice guy, all of a sudden is in constant physical pain for seemingly no reason, and he is tempted to make a very bad deal with this doctor just to get out of it. And how many people have you seen go through horrific injuries like this? There's another episode, The Tear Collector, where this girl, even though nothing explicitly bad is happening to her, she just feels sad all the time, and she constantly feels like crying. And of course, a mysterious man is going to collect her tears. But I love that idea of, you know, I don't know why I should feel happy, but I just feel sad. There's so many real stories dealing with things that real people have to go through, and that really grounds the show in a sense of reality. Not to say that there aren't crazy, over-the-top, Creepshow-esque moments. You know, it may be the budget, you know. If this show had a bigger budget, maybe we would see a bunch of monsters and stuff. As it stands, there are quite a few episodes where they save that for the ending, and then, you know, you'll be watching an episode like I'll Give You a Million, which is relatively straightforward, and then you get to the ending and you're like, whoa, that went nuts towards the end. You do get a few cases like that, and even though they are toned down for a TV budget, there is your fair case of creatures and magic and over-the-top insane moments, so don't worry, those are in here as well. But budget is another thing I want to talk about. Tales from the Darkside does a really good job of doing a lot with a little. There's times when the show really can't do something and has to find a clever way to ride around it, and you don't even notice because you're so engrossed in this episode. The stories know that you have to have a good hook and you have to have good storytelling, and if you can do that, people can ignore, that you're actually pulling off an episode relatively cheap. Tales from the Darkside has several examples of bottle episodes. Episodes that are only a few characters in essentially one location. There's so many of them, but they're usually so good you don't notice. A good example, The Odds. In The Odds, you get this bookie, and his base of operations is this bar, and we stay in the bar the whole time. But one day, this mysterious man on a luck streak comes in and starts to wipe the bookie out, and he makes one final bet that he says the bookie will die at exactly 8 a.m. the next day. And that just hooks you in. And you don't even think about how there's less than 10 characters in this story and the whole thing takes place in one room because you're all laser focused on who this mysterious man is and all these bets that are taking place. The most obvious example of a Tales from the Darkside bottle episode would have to be the episode Answer Me. Answer Me is one woman. She's an actress that just moved into a new apartment in New York, and the apartment next to hers, there's a phone that's just constantly ringing all day. But of course, she finds out the mysterious story of what happened in the apartment next door. Really creepy, and when you get over there and you see what's up, it's a really good story. So yeah, it's the most obvious bottle episode, one character, essentially one location, but you don't think about it too much, and that's the most obvious example. I have to say, Tales from the Darkside uses his budget so well that if you guys are young filmmakers, obviously, if you're young, you're not going to have huge amounts of money. Study Tales from the Darkside. See how they were able to do things that you wouldn't necessarily assume a low-budget TV show would be able to do. You can really learn about using a budget very well by watching this show. It is very interesting. Another noteworthy thing is the way technology is used in Darkside. I always think it's very fascinating. There's time capsule moments of old technology, but there's also a few moments where I'm like, wow, Darkside was very ahead of their time there. There's an episode, Mookie and Pookie, where this guy who's a computer nerd is about to die, and he writes this program that his sister has to finish to transfer his consciousness into the computer. And this was written in the mid-'80s. You see so many stories about this nowadays. In fact, whole shows based around this concept. And Darkside did this in '85, way ahead of its time. You also see another episode, All a Clone by the Telephone, where the tape inside this guy's answering machine kind of becomes like its own organic artificial intelligence, and the tape in his answering machine goes through the phone lines and starts talking to all the other tapes in other machines. And this episode, it seems weird back then, but if you made this episode today and you replaced answering machine with personal computer and you replaced phone lines with the internet, a naturally occurring AI talking to all the other ones across the internet, this show, that episode really does feel way ahead of its time. And there's a few cases like that where you're like, wow, this episode would actually feel more at home now than it would then. And then, of course, there is the times when technology is extremely dated, which are fun too, and real, like I said, time capsule moments. In the episode The Odds, there's this guy, he's using a pocket calculator, and his boss kind of teases him for this new technology. Why can't you just do math in your head? Which I thought was fun. There's an episode, It All Comes Out in the Wash, and which in the episode, this guy's secretary has to literally chart the value of the company by going to the ticker tape, pulling out the new numbers, and writing the little diagonal line on a whiteboard with a marker. And that was really cool. Something that we just pull up on the computer today. She has to pull the number off of a machine and then hand chart it. I thought that was pretty fun. So yeah, there are some cool moments of old-timey tech here that are really just fun to see. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about some of the notable episodes. And we'll start off by talking about the Creepshow 3's episodes. George Romero, he wrote the very first episode, Trick or Treat, a good Halloween episode. There's this rich old miser that everyone in the town owes money to, and he says, I have all your parents' IOUs hidden in my haunted house on Halloween. If any of your kids are brave enough to find them, your debt will be absolved. And of course, he's there. He's got all these elaborate things rigged up to just scare the heck out of the kids. A really classic Halloween episode, and another case of going very extreme towards the end. Gotta love this episode. Stephen King's episode, Word Processor of the Gods. It's about this guy, and he's a writer obviously, and his dead nephew left him a word processor. Talk about technological time capsules, right? Left him a word processor that he hand built. But this word processor has the power to alter reality. How far will this guy go to make the world around him how he wants it to be? And can he do it before this homemade word processor falls apart and he can no longer change stuff? This is a very fun episode, but also it's worth noting that this Tales from the Darkside was a perfect home for it. I mean, he already trusted Romero to adapt his stuff, but you really had to get an adaptation of the story off the ground pretty quick before the word processor technology became obsolete, and it's not near long enough for a whole movie. So a 22-ish minute episode of Darkside, the right place, the right time, and I really am glad we got an adaptation of this King story. A perfect home for it, really. And then Tom Savini's episode, Inside the Closet. I think this was actually the first time he directed something, and he would go on to direct another Romero project, the original remake of Night of the Living Dead. Easily, and I mean easily, the best Night of the Living Dead remake. But in this episode, Tom Savini's Inside the Closet, a girl goes to live with an anthology professor in his extra room. He has a room for rent. And there's a tiny little locked closet door, and she suspects something is living behind this door. And because this is Tom Savini, we actually get a fun little creature in this. And this little creature, you can see him a little bit on the DVD, kind of becomes the show's mascot. This little white humanoid thing, tiny little guy. And if you look up pictures for the show, you'll see this guy. He's, yeah, like I said, the show's mascot. But Tom Savini, special effects legend, right? He's going to pull out a creature this elaborate on a Darkside TV budget. Major props for him for that. More personal picks. I already talked about the episode Slippage. Boy, that one is haunting. A guy, people start to forget about him. They lose his paycheck, they lose his portfolio, and people start to forget to tell him things, and it gets more and more and more to the point his own mom forgets all about him. It's so dark, but the idea that people would just start to forget about you, we've all been forgotten in little ways, and the idea of extrapolating that to the point where you're forgotten about completely is so haunting. So yeah, Slippage is a good episode. Also, the episode Madness Room. It's a rich guy's wife in their mansion. She plays with a Ouija board, and the spirit tells her about a mysterious, haunted, walled-off room, and they go hunting for a secret room in their house. Good haunted house episode, good Ouija board episode, and the whole thing felt like an episode of Tales from the Crypt a little bit, you know? So I really did love this one. But my pick for the best episode this season has to go to Levitation. Levitation is a really great episode. You get this kid, he's a magic nerd, and he goes to see one of his heroes at this obscure little carnival, but the guy's not performing any good magic, and he confronts him after the show. Why aren't you performing your good magic? Why aren't you performing wireless levitation? And he tries to get him to do the trick, but the trick, that's a lot of power, and it's going to have a mysterious cost, and boy, was there a haunting ending to this episode. I really loved it. I think the guy in that episode that plays the magician, the Great Karma, I think that's the same guy that played Lloyd in The Shining. Really good character. But anyway, I really loved most of the episodes in the show. And if I didn't talk about your favorite episode, feel free to leave it in the comments. Like I said, most of them are good. To be honest, there's only two that I really didn't like, and I'm sorry if you guys are fans of these episodes, but the two that I didn't like were A Case of the Stubborns and If the Shoes Fit. To be honest, those really just felt like old-timey comedy that doesn't hold up well nowadays. A bunch of people doing silly characters, and it just felt all old and cringy. I wasn't a big fan of those, but that's only 2 out of 24 episodes. For the most part, I really did like this series, and if you guys have a favorite episode that I hadn't talked about, just leave a comment, and I'd love to hear which ones you guys liked. But all that being said, if you guys want to hear my specifics about any of the Season 1 episodes, I did do individual episode reviews as I was watching them, and there'll be a playlist up here that will tell you that you can see all my reviews for every episode. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave that Darkside playlist here on the bottom. I've got a review for every single episode, and I think those should be all out, or at least mostly all out by this point. I've also reviewed the Christmas episodes and the Joe Hill comics, so if you want to see me talk about more Darkside, you can see that right here. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Darkside playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.